He was president and CEO of the Memorial Healthcare System, is now chairman of the board of the foundation there, and is on the board of the system as well. Very much still involved with our community and is a mentor to many. I won't read through his entire bio. We did actually post the bio on the website, but he's had an interesting career on the academic and consulting, coach, and teaching side. And of course leading large systems. But I just want to say it's an honor and a privilege to have Dr. Collins with us today. He has some wisdom to impart upon us, and I hope you'll pay attention. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it. I'm trusting that you can hear me because I have a difficult time. We need some slides here, George. Can I just advance this? Will that work? Nope. While he's doing that, I want to say good morning to you first thing. We're all off the freeway this morning and here, which was an interesting experience in my travels this morning. But I'm here because of, perfect, thank you so much. I'm here because of some very special people in our organization. Scott Joslin is a longtime employee of the Memorial Health System, one that I helped promote over the years from pharmacist to our Chief Information Officer. Scott Sabula was a part of our organization for a long period of time. I know he's active here. And Kevin Torres, I don't know if Kevin's here this morning, but okay, let me try and I'll move up just a bit here. See if that helps better? Okay. So, some special people I owe a thank you to for the privilege of being with you this morning. Now, I think I'd be remiss and a little naive if I stood up here and an old CEO. I've had about 3 careers. I've looked at this thing looked at executive management from the public side of it. I was the assistant superintendent of schools in Long Beach Unified School District in my first life. I went from there to the Lakers. I spent 2.5 years with the Lakers. I was Jack Kent Cook's assistant for the Lakers and had the privilege of working in the player negotiations, the front office work there. Then I went into the healthcare business in about 1982, and I had the good fortune of working my way through the ranks to the president and CEO of the Memorial Care Health System. So I'd be a little naive with that kind of a background to stand up before this esteemed group and think I was going to teach you a lot or share a lot with you in the world, in the profession of information management, information technology, and chief information officers. That'd be naive. What I am going to do, and where I think I can make a contribution, is to speak directly with you about your career in the world of information management. This thing is changing so rapidly before us that your careers are, on the one hand, we would look and say, gee, things are changing very, very rapidly. There must be some opportunities out there. I'll look around, I'll find some things, irrespective of your early career status or your mid-career status or your seasoned executive status. There must be opportunities out there, and that's a logical conclusion. There's also a lot of mistakes to be made, too, because when things are changing very, very rapidly, it causes us to behave in different ways. There'll be a lot of careers made in this world of healthcare reform. There'll be a few careers that won't survive so well either. And so I thought what I would share with you this morning is about 2 ounces of academia, about 6 ounces of executive experience over the years, a couple ounces of passion for what I do and I know what you do, and a little dose of common sense, and talk about some issues that I think will directly impact your career. So our time together this morning, maybe, and maybe not. I'm not getting much action. There must be a switch on this somewhere, Coach. No, I was looking for I advanced it on the computer. Okay. Well, just do this. It's no problem. So here's how I suggest we spend our time together. Let's talk a little bit about the evolution of these careers of yours over the years. I've watched them. I've watched them for the last 25 or 30 years. And it's been an interesting ride where we are today and the issues confronting you and the opportunities before us today. It's a little interesting scenario right there. Just reflect on that. Then let's talk about what I think are going to be some of the key variables in the future in your careers going forward. And I think that there are issues that we can focus on and sharpen a few of those skills this morning. I'm talking mainly about the whole world of decision making. And we're going to be confronted with that in a very, very big way, in ways, in the information officers world, in ways we haven't been confronted before. So knowing how we're going to do that, I'll spend some time on these, and then for the last 10 or 15 minutes, we'll try and reserve that for just the Q&A and some dialogue on that and meet your time schedule. I've been through all of these. Some of you have been through all of these. Some of you haven't. I remember when Medicare DRGs came in place, we thought the world was really going to stop at that point. There was no way that the system as we knew it at that time could possibly carry on. And we worked our way through 1982 when the then Governor, Jerry Brown, instituted something called selective contracting. And that was the onset of managed care as we know it now in California. We thought, again, for sure, this was about 2 years after the Medicare DRG, we thought for sure the thing was going to collapse. We went through that. We went through the whole HMO movement, the proliferation. Remember the PPOs when they first started as a response to all this. This whole managed care era was an amazing experience for us and amazing opportunities for many. My particular career was marked, the trademark on my career was managed care. Trademark on your career is going to be healthcare reform. That made my career. This one will make your career. So give that some thought as we reflect on it. The Balanced Budget Act of 1997 for President Clinton's tremendous cuts to the system could not possibly survive. We went through this whole issue here. Now we're dealing over in the last column. And you know what? The system has survived just fine. Not every individual has survived as well. A lot of individuals over the years going through these have chosen their own way of reflecting on the circumstances. There were people that detested the managed care movement in California. There are physicians and executives. They were curmudgeons, they were negative, they didn't want to talk about it, they were argumentative, they walked out of meetings, they put their head in the sand, they did all of the negative behaviors, and they did not thrive at all in that era. There were others, on the other hand, who had marvelous careers launched by the managed care movement. It's really, in that situation, as it is in this healthcare reform thing, it's really just a matter of how you want to look at it. I prefer the notion that everyone's problem is someone else's opportunity. And nobody, on the other hand, nobody runs around looking for curmudgeons and negative and naysayers to promote and give additional responsibilities to and have them work at the highest levels of an organization. It doesn't happen. So it is a way in how we look at this, and if the past is prologue, we have found out that careers were built on each of these steps over the past, say, 20 or 25 years. We happen to be right in this one right now. Careers will be made, careers will be broken on that. And a lot of that will have to do with the decisions that you make going forward. It's not enough to know your business anymore. Where we are in this whole world of information technology and the information officer's role, it's not about the numbers and the equipment and the software and the hardware. When you elevate to a higher level in the organization, as the world of information has, the success variable is how you perform in the decision-making arena. Can you be trusted? What kind of decisions do you make? It's no more. You had to know those things to get your job. and all of you do, and you know them very well. But going forward, it's a different ballgame. And you got to think about that just a little bit as we look forward. So what I'm saying is the complexity of what you're doing has changed significantly. Multiple times more complex than it was heretofore. The role and sophistication of IT leadership, it is executive management now. It is not that group down in the basement of the institution with the huge mainframe down there and the air conditioning running around the floors and serving as a support function, trying desperately and mightily to finally automate the payroll system. Those days are really, really gone for us. It is a whole new world, and it's a whole new world for the role of the information officer. It is an integral role in the functioning of these large organizations going forward. I don't care where you are in healthcare, whether you're on the vendor side of it, whether you're on the payer side, whether you're on the provider side. My background is on the provider side, so I have a little bias in terms of references and my thinking on it. But I can tell you right now, these are emerging, to quote someone yesterday morning. Kevin Torres told me yesterday morning, he says, Tom, I think we're going to be rock stars. You know Kevin, you know that's exactly what he would say. But the whole notion of how we've acted historically has to change dramatically. And are we equipped to do these things? We're not in a silo. We're not down in our area providing a service to the real functioning of the organization. We are part of the real functioning of the organization. Can we shift from a collaborative, from a silo kind of a mentality, our little function for executive management, to assume the role of executive management? Depending on how you look at it, there are opportunities, there are some dangers in this, but there are opportunities for tremendous growth, professionally and personally, for each and every one of you in this room. And I don't care where you are in your career. They're going to look for the senior people to take over the senior assignments. You will see in a short period of time that George will be calling chief information officers for CEO positions. That will be happening, and I'm sure George has cases right now where he's pondering those same moves. Clear is the same thing they're doing with physicians right now. At USC, the two-career model is in effect. All of the medical students are also enrolled in MBA programs. They're enrolled in law programs. They're in engineering programs. The dual major concept is extremely robust with the younger generation, the grad students. And the lessons are there. They're telling the professors at the medical school are telling the young docs in training, you will have 2 or 3 careers in your lifetime. And they're training them and preparing them for them right now. So for me to say that the world of the information executive is going to transition to the world of executive management in these large organizations is not a reach. I see it all the time. I see it on a regular basis, and the curriculums are being designed for this cross-pollination of careers and of executive training. So I'm not just speculating on what your future roles will be. I'm telling you, you need to be prepared. This is going to happen. You will be sought after for key executive and key executive leadership roles at the CEO level. It's happening right now with the young people coming out preparing themselves. We've just been in a little bit of another world for a while. We've got to think a little bit differently on that and open these paradigms. And the one thing that they're going to judge you on, and the one thing that the criteria that will be used to evaluate your potential for these roles will be your decision-making expertise over the years, your track record, your accumulation of decisions over time. You will be known, you'll be defined, you'll be promoted by the decisions that you make. Circumstances, you make a decision, you move on. Not so much. Not so much. It is a process. Processes can be improved by taking them apart, discussing them, reassessing them, redesigning them, and moving forward. So if you think about the decision-making process, I see these measurement indices coming out of it, and they can describe the thing in a visionary manner when there's no experience, there's no background, there's no data, and there's no science to support it. In other words, you're working in the dark. Some have that ability. You can practice that ability and you can get better at it. This is what I see us doing. This is the product I see us creating. And you're able to describe it completely enough and visually enough for individuals to implement the vision. That's a technique we're going to have to get better at going forward, because you're not going to be able to push a button and have somebody crank up the data for you to draw you to the logical conclusions. We don't know what's going to happen. They haven't even talked about the exchanges in California. We don't even know what we're going to be required to do. So how are we going to, are we going to sit around and wait? Well, maybe sometime next fall we'll start to get to it, start to figure it out. And when things go active, they go live January 1. How are we going to do with this? You're certainly not going to work it through on a thinking first strategy. Steps that I take to lead me in the development of a product or a service or a program or whatever it happens to be. This is like the exploratory surgery. I don't know what I'm going to find in exploratory surgery. I know it's appropriate in this. I know I don't have background. I know it can't be observed, can't be palpated, can't be imaged, and I can't discern it through laboratory procedures. So it is the only option we have is to begin a process of exploration. In other words, doing first. We're going to have to start some activities in this area of high ambiguity without either visioning or without the thinking first model. If you think about the pioneers, they didn't have a roadmap, when they left to go west. They started. They figured the other option was stay there. Stay there and don't do anything. They didn't know if there was a river. They didn't know where the ocean was. They didn't know what was going to happen. But they had the bias for the only way you're going to stay up with this evolving environment that we're working in the world of healthcare is to become adroit at those two models of decision making. So what have I said? I've said historically, we have a way we like to make decisions. We all love that when we do it, we know how it works, and you get pretty good at it too, especially when you're a seasoned executive like you folks are. When those options don't exist, you, one, wait until the data comes in, wait till the comparative, wait till the competitor analysis, wait for everything to have happened, which will be too late and you will be a failure. So the notion of seeing first, visioning, and the notion sometimes of exploration or doing first become viable alternatives in the decision-making process. Okay? This, that I think when I describe them, you're going to see that we're all familiar with them. One of them's pretty effective, one of them doesn't work very well at all. So in your decision-making process, as you build that career and you begin to move on in the roles of executive management, you're going to find there's a couple of these approaches that your staff is going to bring you. You're probably familiar with them right now. There's an inquiry approach where someone will come to you with a proposal. They want to do this, they have this kind of initiative, they're carrying out this kind of a directive, and they present it to you. You're able to ask questions, you're able to ask for examples, you're able to ask for backup information, you're able to ask for the past practice and these things. An inquiry approach, that's rarer than you think. Most of the time, you're subjected to advocacy on decision making. And it will become more important to you to discern these two as you move into those executive ranks. Most of the time, people have already made up their mind what they want to do. They've already decided, and they're just there to sell you on the notion. You're seeing a lot of that now with people as they come forward with ideas. It's not inquiry, it is not open-ended inquiry, it is not probing, and it's not a pure inquiry approach. They've already made up their mind. They're just there to convince you of what they want to do. The only problem with that scenario and why it's dangerous for you going ahead is because the ultimate decision rests on your desk and you've been lobbied by somebody else's agenda. A lot of people fail on that one right there. You have been let, it comes to, where did we get that idea? Whose idea was this? Where did this come from? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. A lot of times we succumb to this notion of advocacy in the decision-making process. And the higher you go, you realize it now in your roles right now, and that will only increase over time. But as you go up, you can't have your finger, you can't have the pulse of every single function in the organization. When you're sitting in that CEO's chair, you're not going to have the ability to touch the heart and soul of every single function in the organization. You have to rely on others, and you have to be careful as you rely on others, what are you relying on? An inquiry approach in the decision-making process, or the advocacy approach where you're responsible ultimately for the decision, but basically you've been lobbied on somebody else's agenda. And somebody else's agenda may not be in your best interest. So you've got to watch those two. So you got three models of decision-making. You've got the science piece of it. We like that. You've got the other two models of visioning and the other model of pioneering or exploring. And then you've got these overlaid with these two approaches. You're going to be responsible for the decisions, and the people bringing you requests, bringing you initiatives, bringing you requested actions are using one or both of those points. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this, but on the inquiry thing, considering a wide range of ideas, fostering exchange, this will be posted for you. I just want to make sure we have a couple of minutes for the Q&A here. So this will be posted, what I've been talking about. The advocacy, special interest groups, the loss of objectivity. These are the most dangerous things that can happen to you. You're responsible for the decision, except you've been lobbied by somebody's special interest. And they may be, their entire agenda may not be in the best interest of your career or the organization that you're going to be responsible for. I want to take you through a few of what I call some of the hidden traps in the decision-making process. It's one thing when you're lower in the organization, because the lower you are in the organization, and where many of us started, we take directions. Do this, come to work at this time, do this, here's your job description, here's the way it works. This is your job. You're told what to do. As you rise in responsibility in these organizations, you begin to exert your own decision-making authority. First, it's over very small things. As you know, we've all experienced it. You have some authority, but basically, it's pretty limited authority. I mean, you have full discretion in maybe a couple little areas. But as you move along in the areas that you're in right now, your decision-making authority gets larger and larger, and you have only just begun. We know this world of healthcare reform is going to have CIOs in the executive office. And a lot of them will be the folks in this room right here. And as your decision-making grows, there are certain traps. The farther removed you get from your areas of responsibility, there are certain traps that are apparent. The first one that is important, well, they're all important, but the first one in terms of significance for me is what I call the anchoring trap. And you've all had this one, and you're going to get a lot more of it going forward. An example of it starts in something like this. I'll use George here. Well, George, I was talking with the CEO this morning, and we had a good discussion, George. And George, here's what I'd like to have you do. I'd like to have you do X, Y, and Z. What I've just done to poor George, he doesn't know quite where it is right now. I've anchored him in this whole discussion, happens to you all the time. I've anchored him in this whole discussion of this contact. I just walked out of the CEO's office. We had a great discussion over a lot of important issues affecting the organization and all of our personal careers and the future of the organization. And George, here's what I want you to do. Happens all the time. You're anchored in what we would call an introductory concept or sometimes just an introductory phrase. I can take almost any issue that you raise and anchor you and direct you for the decision. You know, I just talked to, we're having a meeting on the selection of some software equipment, and I was just having a discussion with Tom Prislak over at Cedars over there. We had a nice conversation this morning. You know, we talked about a lot of different things, and he was telling me how crummy he thinks this particular product is, and you know, we had a good conversation. We agree on a lot of things, you know. And by the way, when we're selecting products, George, I'd like to have you, you know, give some special attention to the whatever product I'm talking about. This notion of anchoring you in this decision-making process, and a lot of people are very, very good at it. I know you care a lot about people, Tom. I know that's really important to you, Tom. And I just want you to know that this person, you know, on and on and on. You have to watch this one in the decision-making process. They'll lead you to very, very unwise decisions to fulfill their own agenda item. You got to watch that one. And just, you want to have these in the back of your mind. I'm only going to give you 3 or 4. You can keep them in the back of your mind and say, am I being anchored here in this? Has somebody set me up with examples, information, or subtle references to anchor my decision making based on their particular viewpoint? And you see it all the time. Well, I just want to, you know, we need $5 million to buy a new 360-degree slice CT scanner, you know. And I was just yesterday, I was talking to some doctors, and they were saying that, you know, the other hospital down the street's got one of these already, and if the doctors don't get one, they're all going to leave and go to the other hospital down the street, you know, the favorite, you know, medical weapons, race. In technology, we hear this all the time. But pretty soon they'll do this with boards all the time, and in their heart, people resent it because you don't give them the facts, but you frame this issue of the need for this, and all the doctors are leaving, and the people down the street, and never once do they talk about the efficacy or the reimbursement of the instrument or anything like that. It's just all framing the thing, anchoring your decision, so you really can't say no. If you say no, that means you're supporting the docs all leaving, and you want the people down the street to win the medical weapons race and all these other things. These are done in such commonplace in board meetings and in executive discussions, and you're going to be confronted with them. How are you going to deal with that? All the docs are leaving. They're going tomorrow. And nobody asks the question, well, no, Medicare doesn't reimburse for it. No. Oh, it's experimental. No. You know, nobody's asking those questions. They're bringing these things forward to you for a decision. Your career and your accumulation of decisions is your career. And that's what you're dealing with in reality. You're dealing with this anchoring technique. It is the most common in the flaws in the decision-making process. And you got to have a red light that goes on, goes beep, beep, beep when this starts, and you got to sort through that. So let's set that aside. Let's talk about these issues relative to your proposal. Because if you don't clear the air on some of these issues, especially these anchoring issues, you're going to lose on them. You're going to be nothing but a pawn for somebody else's agenda in the organization, and the bottom line is your career is at stake. So watch that one closely. Anchoring. The status quo trap. Status quo, very, very common. This can all be summed up in saying this last phrase here. After all is said and done, usually more is said than done. We don't like to change. We don't like it. We have a bias for the status quo in our decision-making process. If you look at it, there's a strong bias towards alternatives that perpetuate the status quo. The more option given, the greatest bias for the status quo. I can confuse you with 14 options. Would you like to sort through 14 options on this particular initiative? Or would you rather just stay with what we've got and see if we can't make it work? I can lead you down there, and then I can mix up with that a little anchoring. You know, I was just talking with a whole bunch of CEOs. Most of them are really staying in the straight ahead, full force, not a lot of change and not a lot of options. Now we've got 14 options on this new piece of software, this new piece of equipment. Or do you think we ought to do that, or do you think we ought to just hunker down and make it work? Give it the old college try and make it work. Your bias is to make it work. Your bias is to do that. And in this decision-making process, we don't like to change. We know that sins of commission are punished more harshly than sins of omission. If you didn't do it, you can always say, yeah, but it was right on the top of my list. It was my next initiative. I was going to start on it Monday morning. You bet, we already had that in the works. It's got a built-in, excuse system for sins of omission. Sins of commission, not so much. Who's responsible for this? Whose idea was this one? Where'd this one come from? So that's our bias. That's the way we work. So we like to stay with things. Status quo is something we like, and we have to be aware of that. Now I can mix up the status quo with the anchoring. When I'm creating an argument for you, you'll see it all the time. Well, if you think through what goes on in your world, day after day after day in the real world, you see this stuff all the time. You see somebody anchored me with about a couple of paragraphs of anchoring, and now they don't want to change, they don't want to do anything, so they're anchoring me with information that says we ought to stay with the status quo, when in your heart, you got to make a change. It's got to happen, and it's got to happen now. So you watch these, and remember all the time, it's your career that we're talking about. You're the one that's making the decision. So you're meeting everybody else's agenda items and their interest items, these things. But basically, it's your career that you've got to be aware of. So you kind of think through some of these things when you're listening to these reports and these beautifully prepared reports and with the charts and the graph. What's the real agenda here? Where are we really going with this discussion? Am I being anchored with a bunch of baloney just to perpetuate the status quo, so there's really not as much work around this place to do? Think about that one. Pretty common occurrence. Was a pretty common occurrence in my organization, and I suspect you get a little bit of that in yours too. Now the sunk cost trap is one we all fall into this one. Making choices in a way that confirms past choices. Absolutely. Sunk costs are really old investments of time or money that are now irrecoverable. We cling to earlier decisions because we don't want to admit the mistakes. Think about that, and we've all done this one. For example, we hold stocks too long. We go the extra mile for an earlier hire who is not performing, and we throw money after a non-performing company in the hopes that something will happen. It will come around. The right person will be there. They say about management, talent management, when you have the first realization that this person has to go, you should do it right then, because it's already too late. But we don't do that. We really don't do that. In the way our HR systems are set up and the way we work and the function and the need for documentation, we have a lot of people in our organizations that don't need to be they would be better served somewhere else. We are very, very slow to act as professionals. We are very slow. I think maybe it's just the world that we live in, the healthcare world, our passion for our work, our human instincts do not make us very good in this organization. Jack Welch, when he ran GE, you know what he did? He took the bottom 10% of performers every year, fired them. He brought in the best he could find. Each year he took 10% off the bottom. That's when GE was the preeminent corporation, international corporation in the world. That's the way he worked. Take the bottom 10% out every year, keep refilling it, keep reshuffling that. We're not very good at this. We like to do this on the human enterprise. We also like to do it throwing good after bad with systems, hardware, software, all kinds of system issues. So just be aware of this one, that the sunk cost trap is we're pretty good, we're pretty willing to keep throwing good after bad. That's our bias. And just kind of remember that and ask that question, why aren't we making a decision today to do something about this? Why are we giving it 6 more months, 1 more year, 2 more weeks, 1 more run? What's so compelling about that argument, other than the fact that it's ours and we love it to death and we'll do anything to keep it? That's the sunk cost bias that's in all of us. There's not a one of us in this room, myself included, hadn't fallen for that one a lot of. Let's just give it 6 more months. I'm sure it'll turn around if we just give it a few more months. Something that happens to all of us. Estimating and forecasting, pretty good topic for you folks, because we're pretty good, you know, at estimating and forecasting on certain things. We know how long it takes to get somewhere in the car. We're very good at that. Tell me what time of day, and I'll tell you how long it's going to take you to get from here. You know, we know we're very good at estimating in areas that we're familiar with, and we do it all the time. You know, it'll cost about this because we've got a lot of experience. We've got a lot of data, so we've had a lot of experience in certain areas. I can tell you just about, you know, if you ask a good contractor, what's it going to cost to do this and that, if he's done 50 kitchens, he'll tell you, it's going to take about this much to do this, it's going to take about this much, and, you know, based on a lot of experience. But as human beings, we are very, very willing to move our forecasting and estimating experience into areas we don't know anything about. We do it all the time. And that's a trap for you. If you're forecasting and estimating in areas that you know a lot about, that's one thing, good for you. You should be doing that. But you have to be very cautious that we don't move over, estimate, and forecast in areas where we have limited experience or areas not in our area of expertise. We do it all the time. And most of the time, our estimates and forecasts don't work. If I told you how many estimates, you've done this same thing in your initiatives and proposals, I don't have to tell you a thing. You tell me what it's going to cost, you tell me how long it's going to take, you tell me what the benefits will be, the board approves it, we move ahead. It took 50% longer than you said, cost 40% more, and you didn't get the results. But, you know, by and large, you don't have to pay the price. At the mid-level management, you don't have to pay the price. Where you're going to be and where you are right now, you have to pay the price on these. So you have to be very, very diligent in the world of estimating and forecasting. If you're on the receiving end of estimates and forecasts, my advice to you, and the little rule that I used was, what's this person's background in this area of estimating and forecasting on this particular topic? In other words, they know anything about it? Are they just talking? Are they just done an ROI to take to the board, to convince the board that this instrument, item, this purchase should be made, knowing full well the board will never ask them 6 months later to bring back the ROI and give me a comparison between actual and proposed. Boards just don't like to do that, and CEOs don't like to have it happen. They want you to bring the ROI in, and you know the internal rate of return and all the other good financial formulas that we use to get things approved, but we don't have to be accountable. But you know the problem is when you move up the ranks where you are and where you're going to be in the world of information management, you will be accountable. And you are going to be the one that is receiving those requests and those initiatives and those forecasts and those estimates from others requesting your action on them. So just my advice in this particular world is to always be probing in your mind for saying, what's his background expertise in forecasting in this other. In other words, can I really believe what they're saying, or should I take this with a grain of salt and get more data or get more information? Well, the framing trap looks a lot like the anchoring trap. It just simply says it's the way you ask the question. I'd like to ask you a question whether you'd like our organization to lose its stature and be looked down upon by the payers and probably have a diminished account of managed care contracts, or at least lower reimbursement, or if you'd like us to maintain a position of superiority, a position of high productivity, both in terms of the quality of the managed care contracts and their reimbursement. If that's what you want, here's the action I've got to have you take today. Here's what you've got to do. I put you in a pickle that doesn't have an answer. Now, ultimately, it's my agenda. I just want you to buy an upgrade for the managed care contracting system, or the accounts payable or receivable, or whatever the requests happen to be. But the way I'm framing the question for you puts you in a pickle at the higher levels. And the problem, again, as you're moving up and your career is growing and you're assuming more and more responsibility, which is happening on a daily basis. You've got more responsibility by it is exactly 10 o'clock. You've had more responsibility by 10 o'clock this morning than you did when you left your home this morning to drive up here. You have more responsibility. Some of it's articulated, some of it's, you're not aware of it yet, but this stuff is growing. When they're cranking out 50, 60, 70,000 pages, when the Affordable Care Act has 110,000 pages of regulations in it, you know where about half of those regs are falling? On your desk somewhere in the recesses of the information management in your organization. So your responsibilities are growing. The farther up the organization and more responsibility you get, the less you're able to touch the heart and soul, to touch the keys every day. The more you rely on other people to make decisions and recommendations for you, and the more subject you are to these variables in terms of the decision-making process. This is the great one. We all use this one. The bias leads us to seek out information that supports our existing instinct or point of view while avoiding information that contradicts it. Issues of expansion, closure, performance evaluations all fall into this trap. Contact a person with a bias that supports your view, then move ahead. We like people who think the way we do. We all do this. I know you've got the same electronic health record that we do. I'm having a huge problem with it. Problems have really nothing to do probably with the system itself. They have a lot to do with the way I'm managing it, the way I'm communicating, the way I'm seeking support, the way I'm seeking collaboration from others in the organization. But instead of addressing any of that, and people are starting to say, well, it's the system, it's the system, it's the system. So who are you going to do? Call old Tom. He's got the same system. Tom will tell you what you want to hear. It's a great system. Don't worry about Alec. You're going to love this system. Just stay with it. There's nothing wrong with the system. You know, and Tom and Alec may be right. But we all like to do that one instead of addressing the issue. We'll just find somebody. I've just talked to my peers and colleagues. I just came back from the HIMSS meeting. This is the greatest. There's nothing wrong with our decision. I've talked to the leaders in the field. They've all reassured us that we're doing exactly the right thing in our system selection. We like to seek out other people. If in doubt, call someone who's in the same boat you are. You'll commiserate with each other, and they usually agree that all is well. Very common thing. We do this. If in doubt, seek someone who thinks like you do, and seek their reassurance in the process. So, pretty common types of things. A couple of closing thought on all of this. and again, it relates to the evolving role in this world of change that's change is happening so fast you can almost hear it. You know, it almost has a vital signs to it as we look at this thing. As you move up and grow your career, assume more responsibility, which you're definitely doing and going to do, you need to remember one thing. You have left the world of information technology, and you're relying more and more and more. You're more and more and more in the people business. Information technology was selecting a system, and now most of you in this room would have found out that that's the easy part. There are several good systems out there. If you want an electronic health record, there's several of them out there. You can look around the country, and you already know them, but in an hour you could come back with the major players in the country and the systems they use. And that's really not the issue anymore. That was the issue a while back. It was a bit of a mystery. Not so much anymore. There are basic systems out there. Several of them are quite good. The issue is, how do you manage the process and the human aspects of the electronic health record? In other words, how do you keep the docs from having those late night medical staff meetings where they like to have the vote of no confidence over the electronic health record, the executive is responsible for these decisions around here. Those are the real issues today. They're not the system. I'm overly simplistic because it's not my world. But I would suspect even a guy like me could find out the 5 top systems across the country, and I bet I could find out in an hour. I probably wouldn't, you might have some different views on it, but I'd probably be pretty close. If I selected one of those, I'd probably be pretty close. You'd say, yeah, that's a good system. That's not the problem. The world, the business that you're in today, you're in the people business. You're in less of the technology business, much more the human enterprise. And that's your future. That's your future. That's the transition. So I like Herb Keller at Southwest Airlines, the founder and president, and now chairman of their board. He says to this, he says, we're in the people business. We just happen to fly airplanes. And they live that out. That's the world you're going to be in. You're in the people business. You're in the doc relations business, most of you in this room. That's the business you're really in. You're in the board relations business. You're in the collaboration business. This is the reality of where your profession has evolved to these days. The days of the technology, like I described the guys in the basement, years and years ago, no more. You're in the people business. This decision-making thing is a process, and if it's a process, processes can be improved upon. You can get better at making decisions. And remember, your career is simply an accumulation of your decisions over time. And if you understand it's a process, not an event. You don't just make a decision and something else. It's a process. And if you consider it and you're willing to accept the notion that it's a process, then processes can be improved upon. You can then improve those processes, and you can be much more successful in so doing. And that's what's going to put you in that corner office. I've been in enough boardrooms. I do, an old senior guy like me, a lot of people, they don't find me too threatening. So I do a fair amount of work with governance. I'll tell you one thing. The last question they ask, honestly, after they go through all the rituals, and I bet there's some search people in the room, but after they go through resumes and they go through interviews and all that stuff, everything, they've done everything, they've talked to you, the last questions when the door is closed, can we trust her? Can we trust him? And make good decisions? Are they okay? Will they be okay? Will they lead us? Will they make good decisions? That's the last questions they ask. The last question is one of trust, and trust is built on your reputation as a decision maker. Honest to God, that is the last question. When it gets down, everything else is gone. Can we trust her? Is she okay? Will she take care of our organization? Can we trust her decision making? They don't say, is she the smartest one? Is she the sharpest knife in the drawer in information technology and information management? No, 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 no. Can we trust her? Can we trust her in the big picture? Can we trust her to make good decisions? Couple that with the notion that decision making is a process. We've talked about the steps of the process this morning. And if it's a process, we know about processes in healthcare, in the healthcare business. We know about processes. They can be improved upon. But think about those two or three when you put them together. And then I think the last piece of it, my only advice to you, is this a time of great opportunity. It's a time of unparalleled, unprecedented opportunity in healthcare. There are those of you in this room who are going to be wildly, wildly successful in this era. Don't be a curmudgeon. Nobody wants them. Nobody wants to work for a naysayer. Nobody wants to be, just like you don't. The last thing, when you go to work in the morning, the last thing you want is a negative attitude. And you're here, I'm ready to go to work. The last thing you want is a naysayer. The last thing you want is a curmudgeon. The last thing you want to work for is a negative force in the organization. Like, who needs it? Who needs it? Well, remember, that's exactly the way they're looking at you. Exactly. The people that work with you every day, they want some genuine enthusiasm. They want some passion for what we're doing. They want to understand the opportunities. They want a can-do. We can make this happen. We'll do this. This is doable. Let's get on with it. I like the old, whatever it takes. That's my motto. That's what we do around here. Whatever it takes. Let's get on with it. That's what people want. That's when they go to work in the morning. That's the spirit that you need to bring with them. That's the spirit you do bring with them, or you wouldn't be sitting here this morning, you wouldn't be elevated in the roles that you are right now. But just remember, the people that work for you want the same thing that you want from the people you work for. You want some genuine enthusiasm, you want some passion for what's going on around here, you want a can-do attitude, and you want to engender the support and the enthusiasm and touch the spirit of those people that work with you. That's leadership. And those are the responsibilities that you're going to have as you have moved and continue to move up in these organizations. Enough said. We have a very short period of time. We'll take a couple questions if you have anything. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Great job, by the way. Fantastic. So 2 questions sort of related. What advice do you have to us for finding the courage to challenge? Because in the environment, there are going to be different aspects on decisions, some that you're going to agree with, some that you're going to have to challenge people like yourself about. And the second is, how do you build your internal consortium to be able to do that, basically?
Your internal?
Your internal coalition, if you will, to be able to be successful.
I think in terms of how do you make the personal commitment to grow? I think I'm kind of rephrasing it, but here I am, I've got a good job, I work for a good organization. I don't know if it's worth the risk or not. That's a good question. I got a good job, I don't have to drive too far to get to work, Looks like I've got the retirement thing going over here, I'm a little farther along in my career, maybe I just kind of let somebody else do it. I think that's an issue that each of us have to wrestle with. But I would say this, if you don't want to do it and you can't feel it somewhere down here, don't do it. Just let it be. Let somebody else that has because it's going to be full of headaches, it's going to be full of challenges, it's going to have a bunch of opportunities for you. But if it's not in your heart and you don't want to do it more than anything else, then don't fool with it. Don't go in and ruin what is otherwise a very, very nice career that you've developed in your area of specialization. Don't go in on a half-baked. There's a lot of work. That last little segment over there's got a lot of challenges in it. Lots of them. Great opportunities. There are those of you in the room that will be the leaders. There are no leaders in most of those areas. So we're starting in those areas. In fact, like I said, the regs haven't even been written in most of those areas yet. So opportunities abound. But you're going to have to do a little bit of soul searching. But you first got to come to the realization that I hope we did this morning. You're going to fill those CEO slots. Just like the docs are filling them now. Whoever thought that would happen? There's always the hospital guys and doctor guys, and that's the way it was. Not so anymore. That whole thing is blurred. With the continuing escalating role of the management of information in these organizations, you're going to be the CEOs, period. And some of you that have that fire and that spirit ought to start planning that next career step right now. So I think it's an individual decision, but if it's not in your heart, it's too much, it'll take you down emotionally. It'll take you down if you're not willing to fight the battle and endure and stay with it and excel. If you're doing it for some other reason, I would caution against that. Another question over here? Well, perfect. That's okay. Go ahead. One more.
Thank you for an inspiring talk. One question, maybe it's the point you made about omission versus commission. I put it maybe in the lens of accountability. I've sort of said healthcare is oftentimes a meeting-rich, decision-poor environment. And maybe it's the spirit of consensus. I think it's the spirit of not wanting to stand up and say, I make this decision, and stand up and be accountable for it. Just like your comments about, CEO, captain of the ship has to make decisions, but I find even in the senior leadership team, a lot of, step forward if you want to make this decision, and a lot of people step back.
Well, it's failure to act is usually punished less. But the CEOs and the CIOs, let's keep it right here. You have decisions you have to be made. And you're going to have to make them. They're going to hold you accountable for these. And they're going to have somebody's accountable. Now, how you go about making that decision is a completely different. That's where the process comes in. In other words, do you have some confidence in your ability to make a good decision? If you ever even thought about it, maybe it's more complex than just saying, well, I'm going to agree with Alec because, I think he's a pretty good thinker. So whatever Alec wants to do is what I'm going to do around here. Or I'm going to let Alec decide. I'm going to abrogate my responsibility. Let Alec decide. No decision. Or do you have confidence in your ability to say, well, let's just take this decision-making process. This is a big decision we're making. Let's take it apart. Let's look at some of the steps. Let's analyze this thing a little bit from a bit of an intellectual aspect here. But a lot of folks just don't want to make decisions too. And it's very much in vogue right now in corporate America. I didn't know. Well, nobody told me. Well, I didn't find out. That was going on in our organization. Well, I didn't know that was going on. And people skate on that one. They really do. I mean, they skate from the top levels of government in this country to corporate America right on down. No kidding. Was that really going on? I had no idea. Which means you can't hang it on me. And that's pretty commonplace, isn't it? But, people see that. People know when you don't want to make a decision. People know when you don't have the moxie to make the decision based on as much science as you can put in it, best decision possible. And sometimes you got to step up and do it and let the chips fall. And if you've got confidence in your decision-making ability, you understand it's not just a little event making a decision. It's a process. And you've set that process up. You've done the best you can. You got to pull the trigger on it. And you'll get better at it. It's a process. You can get better on it over time. But we have a lot of friends and colleagues in this business who don't like to make decisions because they want to be able to say, no kidding, was that really going on? Gee, I had no idea it was going on in our organization. So I think there's a lot of it, but the time comes when you get in these leadership roles, where you are right now and where you're going to be, the decisions get only bigger. See the problem? The decisions get only bigger and you get farther removed from the day-to-day detail. You don't know as much about the management of your particular operations now as you did 5 years ago. You know more about it then. You were there every day. You knew everything. You knew what this process was. You knew this process. You knew everything. And now as you've moved up, you have colleagues and you have reports and all this other thing. Well, as you continue to move in these organizations, that's a phenomenon you have to come to grips with. You're going to have you're not going to have as much information to make the decision as you want. So you've got to rely on things like this to guide you and direct you. The discipline of making a good decision. And it's not just all visceral. Well, I really feel strongly about this, or I trust Alex, or this or that. No. The discipline of making a decision. And after you've exercised the discipline, then you make your decision. You call the play, and if it goes, fine, based on all of your experience, based on the best discipline you have. And if it doesn't, you have to live with it. You have to regroup. You have to make another decision. I don't know if I answered your question, but I know the feeling that you have where some of these people, like, well, the meeting's over. Well, we're not going to be able to decide today. Let's get together in 2 weeks, which means I don't want to be bothered with it. We're not going to do anything. I'm not making it. I've wasted, 20 or 30 hours of corporate time, chewing this thing around. Nothing's going to happen. I've been in a lot of those meetings. I know exactly what you're saying. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Given that CIOs and IT organizations have to make a lot of decisions based on either risk avoidance or risk management, which is a lot harder to justify an ROI to an executive committee or to a board, and there's a lot of potential damage that could be done if those decisions, end up turning out badly. So having confidence in the decision to say we need to spend money on this area or we need to do this, and this is a big process change, and presenting that to a board, do you have any recommendations on how you can produce confidence for something that you may never happen, but you need to spend the money to prevent it from potentially happening?
Exactly what you're saying. There are some decisions that you can't rationalize with an ROI. Sometimes they're maintenance kinds of decisions. They're decisions that really don't have the replacement, maintenance, expansion kinds of issues where you can't quantify them. The decision will be made, those decisions with the absence of that kind of normal ROI, background recommendation, all the staff work. When those are made, they're made because of who you are. In our organization, Scott Joslin has the credibility to stand up in front of the board and say, this doesn't have an ROI. I'm recommending it for these reasons. Based on these reasons, this is my recommendation. We proceed. I'll report back to you in 60, 90, whatever it happens to be. And with an accumulation of good decisions, they'll support it. Now, if the day comes when that person making those decisions is all over the place and they can't be trusted, remember I talked about that. The last thing they're going to ask, can we trust them? That's what you're saying. There's certain things that have to happen here, and you're going to have to stand up, and people are going to have to say, I believe in you. I will support you. I support what you say because of who you are and because of your reputation. It's going to happen. It happens all the time. And there are not the quantifiable facts that we all strive for, but there are actions that have to be taken. And they're going to be taken, and you're going to be supported. And those of you in the room will be supported, not because of what you said so much. Sometimes these boards don't understand what you're talking about. You deal with some very, very complex matters. And you're taking lay people that are giving a couple of hours at a board meeting, once a month or whatever it happens to be, and you're explaining something very, very complex to them. And you've studied it for a year now, 10 hours a day for a year, and you're going to present it in, 10, 12 minutes at a board meeting? You know what they're really doing? They're giving you a vote of confidence. Because we would all be naive to say that we totally understand your recommendation. So about 90% of the time, they're voting on you and your character and your reputation as a decision maker. Honestly, they are. Hey, most of the time, God love them. I'm on boards. I sit on them. These guys come in. Whoa, it's by me. I don't say that. But Scott and those guys know that. But if he makes the case, I've watched him for 25 years, and if he makes the case, I will support him based on who he is and his reputation as a decision maker. That's why I selected the topic, and that's why I've tried to share with you my feelings on it, its role, it's a process, it can be improved, you will improvement, and you're going to be in those corner suites. Okay, I got to stop and get you back on schedule. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. My pleasure.
Tom will be around all day, and he's on